Tell the progressives out there, get in gear, man. There's a lot at stake here. And our progressive base, you should not stay home.
And now, Yes We Can has become Don't Stay Home from the vice president.
The new vice president trying to get those voters engaged any way he possibly can, even throwing out the word man. I like that. All right, Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Washington Post Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
And I'm Amy Walter.
Every day at noon Eastern, we're right here bringing you the latest in politics, everything you need to know, man. And it's twitter.com/Rick Klein, twitter.com/Amy E. Walter. Please kick us off.
All right, dude. We're going to start with tax TIFF. All right, the president went out yesterday into the Rose Garden, still blaming Republicans for holding up the tax vote. Yet this morning, Minority Leader John Boehner challenging Pelosi for an up or down vote on the tax cut extensions, all the tax cuts extensions. What does this mean, and who's going to blink first?
Well, this is the Republican position all along to try to bring this up. Democrats have the advantage of actually controlling the schedule. They don't have to bring up anything that John Boehner doesn't. John Boehner can say whatever he wants about bringing things up. Democrats can control the order of these things, but they continue to be split within their caucus. We saw a little bit with Republican divisions. Now it's focused back on Democratic divisions, I think, which is really where the action is.
That's right. They have 30 signatures right now saying extend all the tax cuts. Democratic do. Signatures. So let's see if they can push that number more. Okay.
Next up, it is makeup time in Delaware and beyond. Christine O'Donnell, the new Republican nominee for Senate, is getting the backing of much of the Republican establishment now. The chairman of the NRSC, after giving just a lukewarm statement, has now endorsed and has sent money to Christine O'Donnell. But I think, Amy, the big question is still going to be, are they really behind? It's one thing to say you're behind $42,000. That's all well and good. But are they really going to be behind this race in Delaware? As long as national Republicans think this is lost, I can't imagine them throwing good money after bad.
And you know what? They may not need to. I think you're going to see a whole lot of money coming through the internet and other venues. The real question is, will Christine O'Donnell have the campaign infrastructure to spend it well and spend it smartly? All right. The firewall. President Obama heads to dark blue Connecticut to campaign for Dick Blumenthal, who not all that long ago was considered a shoo-in. Recent polls have shown both Dick Blumenthal's race tightening and the president's approval rating dropping even in that state. It's one of the few states where the president can actually go, or, well, actually where a Democrat may want him to go, Rick. But this is also a sign that Democrats are really rallying around those must-win states. I'm curious to see how long they're going to be in places like Kentucky and Missouri if they just have to go pull back and just play defense. Right,
not where the president wants to have to be campaigning. And finally today, it is potion number 9. You got to feel bad for Charlie Crist. He is 9th on the Senate ballot. They have just released in Florida the ballot there, and he is below not just Marco Rubio and Kendrick Meek, but also such huge luminaries as Alexander Snitker, Bernie DeCastro, Sue Askland, and of course, the infamous Bruce Ray Riggs. It's hard to imagine a lot of folks looking that far down on the ballot. This is actually a blow to Charlie Crist.
Maybe the butterfly ballot would be good for him. He might want to bring that back.
How many folds do you have to go to get there? Well, we begin today's discussion up on Capitol Hill with Senator Judd Gregg, a Republican of New Hampshire. And Senator Gregg, I want to ask, first of all, your reaction to the results in the primary for your Senate seat on Tuesday. Kelly Ayotte pulled it off. Does this mean, in your mind, is the Tea Party maybe a little bit less potent in New Hampshire than it is elsewhere in the country?
Well, Kelly is a pretty conservative candidate and a very strong candidate. She was a superb attorney general and one of the leaders in our state in law enforcement, and really brings a lot of talent and ability to our party. Ovid LaMontagne, who finished very close, is also a quality guy, also a conservative. So I don't think this was really a conservative versus something else fight. This was basically two people who had very strong opinions, who were pretty close on the issue of ideology, and it was just a question of who you like better. And they were both nice people, good people, and quality people.
Well, obviously, the national media fascinated with where Sarah Palin is endorsing. She got behind Kelly Ayotte early on in that race. Do you think it's a good idea for Kelly Ayotte to bring Sarah Palin back to New Hampshire or highlight her endorsement in that campaign?
My view is that outside endorsements have virtually no impact on an electorate. People go and vote on the basis of what they know, especially in small states where people actually physically meet and know on a personal level most of the candidates. So I happen to think that Kelly's going to run a very strong race on her own accounts, and she will be an extremely strong candidate. And hopefully the race will turn on the issues, and the issues are significant. Her opponent is down here in Washington spending money like crazy trying to bankrupt this country, and we need her down here to make sure we get some fiscal discipline and New Hampshire common sense.
Senator, I want to ask you about the big tax debate that we're seeing emerge on Capitol Hill. President Obama is out there saying, look, Republicans just want to hold this hostage. What's wrong with what he is saying? He's saying, look, we know we don't disagree on the tax cuts for everyone making less than $200,000. Let's extend them, and then we'll have the other debate. What's wrong with just saying that?
Well, there's a lot wrong with that. To begin with, this president and this Congress is spending money like what's going out of style. Why don't we start where the problem is? The problem is spending. This nation is being bankrupted by a Congress and a president who genuinely believe that you can grow the government radically and increase its size and spend money like there's no tomorrow and pass those bills on to our kids and then expect our kids to have a high standard of living. They won't talk about spending. They just want to talk about raising taxes on people. That's the first problem. Secondly, you don't raise taxes in a recession. Obviously, we're in an economic slowdown of significance. You're not going to go out and raise taxes, especially when taxes aren't really the issue. Revenues aren't really the issue right now. What's the issue right now is the profligate spending of this Congress and this presidency. You know, they've taken the government from 20% of the GDP up to 24% of the GDP. And once this health care bill kicks in, it's going to go to 26, 27% of GDP. Government's never been that big before, except during World War II. Well, that's how big it is, and it's all on the spending side of the ledger. Whereas our revenues, which have historically been about 18.2% of GDP, are going to get back up to around 20% of GDP within 2 or 3 years on their own projections.
Well, help us square this then. The increase in the deficit by extending the tax cuts seems to me there's not enough spending cuts that can be made to make up for the deficit that we're continuing to build up.
Well, we're building the deficit because of the spending. That's where the deficit is coming from. If you have revenues which are exceeding your historic norm, the historic norm is 18.2%, and revenues are headed up towards 19, 20%, it's not a revenue problem. It's the fact that you've taken the size of the government from 20% of GDP up to 24%, headed towards 27%. And that massive explosion in spending is where the problem is. It's not on the revenue side, it's on the spending side. So why put in place all this additional spending? Why don't you start cutting spending first? Because that actually is where the problem is.
Senator, I want to ask you on one other topic. Elizabeth Warren, we've seen reports, and RABC's Jake Tapper is reporting that the president will be moving to put her in a sort of an interim post, concerned about Senate confirmation. What do you make of this choice for the new Financial Protection Agency?
Well, first off, I think it's a terrible adulteration of the process. This position, as it's structured in the financial reform bill, is going to be one of the most powerful positions in Washington. It creates a person in charge of an agency which is going to have almost $1 billion budget, which is not overseen by the Congress. All the money flows into her accounts without any congressional oversight. The only time that Congress has any input, or the American people have any input on whoever gets appointed to that position, is at the appointment time, and then they get a 5-year term.
What is your concern about what she would do?
My concern is that she would use the agency for the purposes of promoting social justice as versus for the purposes of promoting better credit and having a stronger financial system. When you separate the credit process from the banking regulatory atmosphere, you're creating a basic conflict there. And if you got somebody who's in charge of who's going to have to supply credit, who's got a social justice agenda as versus an agenda of actually getting credit out to people who can pay back and making sure that those people are told what the cost of their credit is, you've got a problem for the banking system, and we've already been through a banking system problem. We don't need another one.
All right, Senator Judd Gregg, Republican of New Hampshire. I know you got to get to votes in the Senate floor. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much for taking the time to have me on.